Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be ranking the Era 3 women who have done at least 3 seasons of the challenge. It took me a while to do this one because I was writing and recording the Era 3 women and the Era 3 men video at the exact same time, just so I could push both of them out at the same time. So, like the other 4 videos, I am going to go over the rules and the stipulations that I have used to determine my rankings, though some of them won't matter as much for Era 3 and Era 4 than they did for Era 1 and Era 2. And I'm going to get into those specific seasons or those specific criteria that doesn't fit much here when I get there. Also, I don't have as much to say about the Era 3 women because one, they haven't done nearly as many seasons as some of the Era 1 and the Era 2 women, and two, they didn't play in as many formats compared to the women of the prior generations. So there were some other things I have to look into deeper to kind of balance things out. So, the first category that I am looking into is the competitions. So, this involves the dailies, eliminations, and the final performances. Dailies, I'm not going to focus on as much because I'm just not. And usually, when it came to the dailies, I put this into heavy consideration for a lot of the earlier era seasons where a lot of those daily wins were due to team daily wins and they weren't really solo or pair daily. So that's why I considered them. But that will probably be something that I do when I rank everyone who did at least 3 seasons and comparing people from different eras. So the one thing that I am looking forward to or that I'm considering when it comes to the competitions is that if someone has more early boots on their resume, so for this list, this fits under people who were out in the first 2 rounds, they will be lower on the list. But even if you have a lot of earlier met boots, you're going to be lower on the list compared to someone who always does well, makes it to the end game, makes it to the final, or wins. So that just kind of just makes sense there. So the other category that I am looking into is the amount of finals that a person has reached, the amount of finals that a person has won, and the amount of seasons where they were close to getting to the final. And when I mean close to the final, I mean getting eliminated in the last 2 rounds before the final starts. So that's kind of where I consider the end game. So if you thrive in more seasons and if you do really well in more seasons where you fit under one of the 3 categories, at least you'll be higher on the list, which makes sense because it shows that you consistently do well. There are a few seasons within the people that debuted in Era 3 that has team wins, but it's not as many. But due to the seasons where they were team seasons, or there were seasons that switched the formats to where they were put in teams, I do consider team dailies to be inflated when it comes to the daily record, especially since you could suck at that particular chance, but because you were on the right team, that team win counts as a daily win for you. So I do have to keep the fact that team challenges do inflate daily numbers, so I won't weigh them as highly here. Obviously, if you have a bad elimination record, you will be lower on the list since it means that one, you can't avoid elimination to make it to the end, and two, it also means that you can't save yourself once you are in elimination. So it means that your chances of getting eliminated and not lasting long in a season to be very high. Also, the final thing that I am putting in this category is that the more finals lost and the more finals missed, and the more seasons where you're not close to the final, you are lower on the list because it means that you can't make it to the end, and there's always something that causes you to be out earlier. The second category that I am considering here is longevity. So this refers to the amount of seasons someone did and the right bracket of years that they competed on. The second category, or that second part, I'm not considering as much because the earliest an Era 3 person could have debuted on the show was 2011, and the latest they could have debuted in the era is 2017. So it's not like they are people who competed 20 to 25 years ago, like some of the Era 1 and Era 2 people, and most of those seasons were old. And a lot of the formatting issues or the older formats were before Era 3. So obviously, the less seasons they did, the lower they are going to be on the list, just simply due to the fact that they don't have as much data compared to some of the others who have done twice, thrice, or four times the amount of seasons. But they have a decent enough of a pool to look into their stats, which is why 3 seasons is the minimum criteria here. Also, seasons that are only done in a few years are lower on the list. Obviously, this isn't as much of a factor compared to the people who debuted on Era 1 and Era 2, but it is still a factor here since if you only competed in a few years compared to someone who competed in 14 years, which is the amount that's the earliest Era 3 person could have competed in, we don't really see how you've grown, really. So it just makes to give someone who's done well in all of those 14 years, if they've been competing for 14 years compared to someone who's only played for 2 to 3 years. So, yeah. Also, this kind of just leads into my next point. The more seasons someone has done, the better. So let's just say you did 3 seasons and you did well on 3 seasons. Let's just say we're comparing them to someone who did 12 seasons and they did well on like 10, 11, or all 12 other seasons. The person who has done well on more seasons, they deserve more credits because they've been, not only have they've been able to replicate that success on several other seasons, but they've been able to do it on several other years compared to someone who's only had success on a few seasons overall or someone who only did a few seasons. This also kind of just leads to what I was briefly talking about earlier. People who have thrived on seasons that are many years apart and they've seen success in many years and many decades. I guess in this case, a decade or a decade and a half, they're going to be ranked higher than someone who's only had success in a few years. So that's kind of how I put it all together for this group when it came to longevity. So the next category and criteria that I am considering are eras and formats. Obviously, this isn't going to be as big of a deal with the Era 3 women or Era 3 and Era 4 people just in general because most of the seasons from this point onward are either paired seasons or individual seasons. Just from the back of my mind, there are only 2 seasons that are team seasons from this point onward, though there are a few other seasons that have a switched format in Era 4, where a portion of those seasons were team seasons. But in general, almost all of the seasons from this point onwards are paired seasons or individual seasons, so it's harder to make it to the end and to have success in these seasons. So there are no seasons or eras where there are no eliminations from this point onward, so that's not criteria like it was for Era 1 and Era 2. The more success you have on dual or individual seasons, you'll be higher on the list since they are more competitive. There's less people in the finals, therefore less people winning, and it means more people are getting eliminated compared to some of the older eras. There are no seasons from this point onwards where there are vote-offs or everyone goes to the finals, so that's really not a consideration for them. So I do have people who thrive on team seasons with barely any eliminations will be lower on the list. But I will say that the team seasons from this point onwards, they do have a lot more eliminations compared to some of those Era 1 and Era 2 team seasons. Obviously, from this point onwards, the seasons are considered more modern when it comes to their format and time frame, so success in modern seasons will have you higher on the list, though that won't really be much of a factor for people from this point onwards because they are competing on modern seasons. The final category that I am considering for these rankings is politics. So this will involve the type of alliances that people are in that got them success in their seasons or through several seasons, whether they can get into an alliance or not, what type of moves that they make to better position themselves throughout that particular season or seasons, and also, if you are using politics and you are avoiding eliminations due to politics, where that should definitely be given credit to. So this is just going to be a talking voice that I mentioned throughout all of their sections. It's not going to be something that you visually see on the screen. So, at dead last at 19th, I have Simone Kelly, who competed on Battle of the Exes 2, Rivals 3, and 30-30. So, there really isn't going to be a lot to say here. Simone never made it far in any of her 3 seasons, and I don't even think she made it past the 1/3 portion of any season. On the first season, Battle of the Exes 2, she was paired with John, and they were automatically sent into elimination during the third round due to her performance in that daily. They are taken out by Adam and Britni, where they do beat Dustin and Jessica in a redemption, and Jemmye and Knight did DQ in the round afterwards in the redemption before getting taken out for good by Bananas and Nany. I have even less to say about her other 2 seasons, where she was paired with Thomas on Rivals 3, and they ended up quitting during the round that they were nominated for an elimination due to his girlfriend, where they probably would have had a good chance of going home that round anyways, which was the third round. And then in our final season, 30-30, it had her immediately purged to the Redemption House, and even without that fight with Shane getting her DQ'd, there's almost no way that she wins the Redemption Challenge to come back into the game. There's really just nothing good here. At 18th is Latoya Jackson, who competed on Free Agents, Invasion of the Champions, and 30-30. So I went back and forth as to whether to place her or Simone as last, as they have very similar stats and journeys, but I put her higher for 2 reasons. One, she won a solo elimination, and two, she didn't quit or DQ in a season. Anyways, Latoya was nominated for the first round of Free Agents because of her poor performance on the daily and being a rookie, where she did win that elimination against Jemmye. It didn't take her long before she was sent into elimination again, where she did lose to Maria in the 4th round of the season. On Invasion of the Champions, it did seem like she was good with the majority group, but they all had to win their way to the main house either by winning an elimination or a daily. And she failed to do that, where she was the last woman booted before the Oasis portion of the season, as she lost the 3rd elimination to Sylvia. And then on her final season, 30-30, she was immediately purged and then lost the redemption to Jenna. She never made it past the 1/4 or the 1/3 mark of a season, and while she has done more individually than Simone, she really hasn't accomplished much of anything during her short time on the show. At 17th is Jessica McCain, who competed on Rivals 2, Free Agents, Battle of the Exes 2, and Rivals 3. I am honestly shocked that she isn't dead last on this list, though there's definitely an argument for her to be such, and literally right before I started recording it, I heavily considered putting her last, despite me already writing my ranking and the script for this. Unlike the 2 women before her, she has been the first 2 booted from a season a lot, but she at least has one solid enough season, which is why I kind of bumped her up over the other 2. Her first season is Rivals 3 with Anastasia, where they got last place on the daily, and they had to face Maria and Cook, where they lost and they were the first woman team to be eliminated. She came back for Free Agent, and I don't recall any major alliances she was on, but she did last a while in the season, where she did win a few dailies on the season, with varying formats via teams, pairs, individuals, or whatever. But she was voted into elimination close to the end game, where she was taken out by Cara Maria. She and Dustin were sent into elimination during the first round of Battle of the Exes 2 due to the lack of connections, but they were taken out against Adam and Britni. Redemption did cause them to be the second boot instead of the first boot, where they did win in exile against Haley and Thomas, but they lost to Simone and Jadon. And then on our final season, Rivals 3, Jessica was paired with Johnny, where they lost the first 2 dailies of the season, causing them to be in elimination for both rounds, where they did win against Cheyenne and Devin, but lost in the second elimination to Amanda and Nelson, and she was the main reason why they went into elimination to begin with. The fact that she was booted really early on 3 out of 4 seasons earned her a very low spot here, but at least she made it far on one season, could win some dailies in elimination and whatever, but overall just a really poor career for her. At 16th is Jasmine Reynauld, who competed on Rivals 1, Battle of the Exes 1, Battle of the Seasons 2, Rivals 2, Free Agents, All Stars 2, and All Stars 4. So now we're getting to someone who did a lot of seasons and has a leveled enough career at this point. Jasmine was paired with Jonna on her first season, Rivals 1, where they did win the first daily, and of course they were rookies, so they were nominated a few times, where Jonna, note that I didn't say Jonna and Jasmine, beat Sarah and Caitlin, where they're able to get to the last woman's round before the final, where they were taken out by Cara Maria and Laurel. Sadly, things won't go good for Jasmine, for essentially again, since she won't ever make it as far, and she'll never win an elimination again. She and Tyree were paired together on Battle of the Exes 1, where they lost the fourth daily and were sent home by Anissa and Rachel. Due to Cancun being tied to San Diego on Battle of the Seasons 2, where they won a few dailies and were in a good position politically for a lot of this season, she made it relatively far on the season, but she stepped down to go into elimination because Janae didn't want to, where they were getting close to the end game, and it wasn't a good choice. Since she lost the Hall Brawl against Sam, with CJ, of course, losing to Zach as well. There really isn't anything notable about her on Rivals 2, where she was paired with Teresa. They had a daily thrown to them, and it was mainly Teresa's politics that ruined their spots, but they got booted mid-season against Camilla and Jemmye. And then on her final flagship season, she was booted on the fourth round as she pulled the kill card to play balls in against Laurel on Free Agents. She would return to the franchise 7 years later on All Stars 2, where she had a few Cancun numbers and was kind of forced to be aligned with the Kingdom's parents because she was paired with Latoya in the second half of the round, but they lost in the second to last round before the final to Melinda and Nehemiah. On All Stars 4, it seemed like she was playing solidly politically and had a lot of allies, but Veronica was somehow allowed to convince Nicole at the elimination to not choose her after already choosing Veronica. So Nicole essentially chose Jasmine, causing Jasmine to go in and lose to Nicole in a physical elimination mid-season. Jasmine has never been booted too early, so I do give her props there, but she only has made it close to the final twice, has never made it to a final, and has an abysmal elimination record, which is a huge weakness. But there's more here than the women below her. At 15th is Britni Thornton, who competed on Dirty 30, Vendettas, and Final Reckoning. I might switch her around with one or two people, but I'm not the most sure of it, but she's here for now. She made her debut on Dirty 30, and due to her being a rookie, she was sent into a good amount of eliminations in the season, where she did win against Brianna and Nicole throughout the season, not the most notable names, and was able to make it pretty far until she was eliminated by Camilla and sent home in the third redemption by Cara Maria. She came onto Vendettas immediately hooking up with Brad, which caused her to be in a bad position politically, and a few people wanted her gone specifically. And despite winning the daily on the final round that caused her to go home, the male members of the Troika decided to nominate her, and she lost to the second mercenary round relatively deep into the game by Laurel. And then her final season, Final Reckoning, had her purged immediately since she couldn't follow instructions and was sent home with the first redemption. Nothing really that remarkable about her journey on the show. Had two mess seasons where she made it far but not into the end game, and one poor season where she was immediately sent home while only doing 3 seasons, which caused her to be here. She doesn't have notable weaknesses, and she has a balanced elimination record, but there's just not a whole lot there. At 14th is Nicole Ramos, who played on Battle of the Bloodlines, Rivals 3, Dirty 30, and Vendettas. She's also someone that I might switch a few spots higher or a few spots lower, but I'm not the most sure about it, but she's here for now. Her first season was Battle of the Bloodlines, where she was with her cousin Nany as a duo, and they were booted mid-season, with Nany losing the elimination, and they didn't really have any numbers by that point. Also, the few daily wins that she has from this season are due to the team competitions. Her second and her best season is Rivals 3, where she was paired with Dario, and they were essentially fighting with the others to be third place to the Vinny and Jenna and Sarah Bananas alliance. Also, ruining the plan to take over from that duo by throwing in their allies Ashley and Corey, and even kind of turning on Nany, beating her at the second to last elimination. But it got them to fourth place against Banana and Sarah, where they lost to them at the location change, so they didn't even get to the final as they wanted to. Her third season was relatively unimpressive, as she was booted kind of early in the season, losing to Britni in the elimination, and leaving in the second redemption challenge, where she lost to Anissa roughly halfway in the season, where she didn't really have any numbers, and she was seen as weaker. And then she was purged immediately on her final season of Vendettas, where she did not even make it to the main house. She did make it to the end game of one season, but there really isn't much there during her time on the show. At 13th is Amanda Garcia, who competed on Rivals 3, Invasion of the Champion, Dirty 30, Final Reckoning, War of the Worlds 1, Spice Lies and Allies, Battle of the Eras, and USA 2. Literally, she was 12th right up until I actually started recording this part because okay, I'll explain why she was initially 12th. So I had her there because she has done more seasons, but due to that, she also had more chances to get to the final, but never got there. And she screwed up a lot more than some of the others did. That's why I switched her for the person who initially was at 13th. Amanda had more options, and she actively self-sabotaged a lot more in comparison. So she and Nelson were alternates that came in after Leroy and Averey were DQ'd on Rivals 3, and they were immediately sent into elimination, partially due to her fighting with the entire house, where she and Nelson did beat Jessica and Johnny, but lost in the next round against Jemmye and Kelly Ann. Amanda did turn it around for Invasion of the Champions, where she joined into what would become the Lavender Ladies Alliance, won a daily to get into the Oasis, and really relied on her alliance, where she was booted in the final elimination before the final against Ashley and Nicole. And a part of this was because she gave up her safety for Ashley in the first round, which shows her lack of self-interest, which will be a theme for her in the future. So they did have a lot of influence politically, but the killer instinct just isn't there for her individually. Her next season, Dirty 30, was a poor one, where she was immediately purged in the first daily and then lost the first redemption to Jenna. Final Reckoning should have been a good season for her, as there are a lot of good elements to her game here. She won a decent amount of dailies with her partner Zach. Their pair was aligned with both sides of the house, should have been enough to set them up really well, but she and Zach could not get along well enough where they sacrificed themselves for their allies when they won the daily as they couldn't nominate someone, and then they lost to Devin and Corey, where Zach's injury took them out before the third redemption. From here on out, Amanda really had little numbers, and she was on her own on War of the Worlds 1, where Ashley was immediately booted and Hunter turned on her, but she did win a daily during the season. But she and Josh were booted mid-season by Cam and Ashley being allowed to cheat essentially due to Jenna having a grudge on her, as Jenna won the daily that round. She went away for a few years and came back on Spice Lights and Allies, where the veteran alliance war lords one another throughout the entire season and weaponized the format to stick together. Despite pissing people off for switching teams and not being as motivated, she did almost make it to the final, though she was taken out in the last round by Tori. Her following seasons were huge disappointments, where she was out early in the fourth round, being taken out by Desi on USA 2, and was taken out immediately, with her being thrown in by Corey over someone like Averey, who no one even knew, on Battle of the Eras, where she lost the first elimination to Nia. While she showed more potential than some of the people around her on this list, all of her early beats were essentially her fault, with being in a poor position politically, sticking her foot in her own mouth, or just performing poorly in the challenges, though she tends to do well in a lot of the mental stuff in the game, but that just clearly isn't enough. In addition to that, her record is terrible, though a lot of people justify it due to her getting a lot of physical eliminations. At 12th, I have Averey Tressler, who competed on Battle of the Exes 2, Rivals 3, Battle of the Eras, and All Stars 4. So yeah, she was the one that I switched with Amanda at the very, very, very last second. And I did this because despite doing half of the seasons Amanda did, she has similar stats when it comes to their good and bad seasons, though she has a better elimination record. And her one bad season literally wasn't her fault, but I felt like Amanda's bad seasons were actively her fault. So, in general, she's really a hard one to gauge when it comes to her challenge career. Averey was paired with her ex Johnny on Battle of the Exes 2, and while he was friends with a lot of the men in the house, it didn't seem like a lot of the people liked her outside of Nia, DM, and Adam. They didn't win a single daily throughout the season and got last a few times, which is why they went into 2 of the 3 eliminations they did, where they took out Thomas and Haley and Adam and Britni, with that pair going on an elimination win streak, before losing about 2/3 throughout the season to Leroy and Nia. I can't fault her for Rivals 3 since she was DQ'd right away due to her partner Leroy entering the game with a back injury, and I guess they didn't have an alternate to replace Leroy solely. It would take her about 7 to 8 years for her to come back to the show on All Stars 4, where she won 3 dailies in the season, and they were all individual/pair dailies as well, and was only in the bottom group 3 times, while being consistent in the other dailies. Averey's issue was her scared gameplay, where she refused to go into an elimination to get a star. I think it was against Tina, if I remember correctly, causing her to get purged right before the final, where she did lose that purge daily to Laurel. And then on Battle of the Eras, she was in a position of power on the third episode, but threw herself down into the elimination to, I guess, make a point and to not play a scared game anymore, taking out Jody, though that was kind of audience help as well. But then she ended up getting booted at the end of the team's portion, where Rachel beat her. She can hold her own in elimination and some of the dailies, but she has never made it to the final, and her career is still pretty limited. At 11th is Marie, who competed on Battle of the Seasons 2, Invasion of the Champions, Dirty 30, Vendettas, and Final Reckoning. Honestly, I am kind of shocked that she made it this high, so it's really because the others are worse than her rather than anything she did, and she at least made a final where essentially everyone below her didn't. Her first season was Battle of the Seasons 2, where the St. Thomas people were a part of the large alliance, but they were not as high on the totem pole as they thought, and she was really the only one on the team trying to politic. But they did make it far, with her and Rob winning an elimination against Alton and Nany, which Alton may have thrown, and they were booted late into the season right before the location change, being taken out by Dustin and Trishelle. She would not return to the show for many years, and when she did decide to return, it didn't end well, being the first boot on Invasion of the Champions against Kailah. 30-30 wasn't a much better season for her, as she plotted to target Kailah, but it ended up with her friend Jenna getting sent home and the woman losing trust in her, where she was easily eliminated by Tori and sent home by Aneesa in the second redemption challenge mid-season. Vendettas really wasn't any better, but she had an alliance with Kailah and Cam, which didn't do her much good, especially when the latter turned on her mid-season and she lost an elimination to Kailah. Her final season, as I'm recording this, is Final Reckoning, as she was paired with Carmaria, who always makes it far, and it kind of caused them to be in the middle of the house, but Carmaria always pisses people off, and Maria was expendable to the 11-day leaders. Despite all that, they made it to the end after being eliminated by Nelson and Shane, and then winning the third redemption against Cam and Katie, and she got last in her only final. She really isn't good at the challenge element, and I do give her props for politicking always, and her elimination record is horrible. But she has a few solid seasons and actually made it to the final, so she's better than the others based off that criteria. At 10th is Jemmye Carroll, who competed on Battle of the Seasons 2, Rivals 2, Free Agents, Battle of the Exes 2, Dirty 30, Vendettas, Final Reckoning, All Stars 1, and All Stars 3. I'm really shocked that she made it this high, but I do think that it says more about the weakness of a lot of the Era 3 women than the strengths of Jemmye herself. She was booted mid-season on her first season, Battle of the Seasons 2, since the New Orleans team was physically weak, despite being in the majority alliance, though she and Knights did win a daily on their own. Her best season is easily Rivals 3, as she was partnered with the powerhouse Camilla, and that served her very well in the season, as they won a daily, and her only 2 elimination wins throughout her entire career came from this season, where they beat Jasmine and Teresa and Aneesa and Deanne, though those names aren't the strongest when it comes to elimination outside of Aneesa, leading to a third placement for the women that season. Despite all that momentum, it went out the window where she pulled the wrong kill card, causing her to be the first person booted on Free Agents against Latoya. And she was also out relatively early on Battle of the Exes 2, as she was partnered with Knight and they were sent into elimination for losing the fourth daily, and they ended up losing that elimination against Adam and Britni, with Knight getting injured, causing them to be taken out of the Redemption house. Obviously, with Knight's death, she needed a few seasons and a few years off, but she did come back on Dirty 30, where she did not win a single daily in the season, where damn near everyone who made it past the first few rounds won at least one, so that says a lot about her. But it seemed like she was in a decent enough place with a lot of the cast, and we did see her make some self-serving moves, so at least she had that in her favor, but she was taken out by Camilla roughly 3 quarters throughout the season and lost the third redemption to Carmaria. Vendettas was one of her better seasons, as she made it very far on in an individual season, and it did seem like she was close to a lot of the other women, but she never went into an elimination throughout the season, and no one was targeting her, but she was purged right before the final, causing her to be the last woman eliminated before that final, though I doubt she would have done well on that final. She was out first on Final Reckoning due to Jenna not being able to find her in time and not being chosen in Redemption. She was one of the newer people to make it onto All Stars 1, making it to the final on the first season, though that season really wasn't competitive, and I believe she was the youngest one, so it was advantageous for her. But she quit early on in All Stars 3 due to her father's health issues. So, in my opinion, she's kind of just mediocre at best all around, or a bit less than that overall. Also, her elimination record isn't great, but it's better compared to someone like Averey, and she made it to another final, hence her being one spot higher. At ninth is Nia Moore, who competed on Free Agents, Battle of the Exes 2, Battle of the Eras, All Stars 3, and World Championship. Just based on her size, I think people expected Nia to be an absolute beast on the show, but it really never came to pass. Her first season, Free Agents, was pretty unspectacular as she found herself in the elimination on the third round, partially due to her being a rookie, and was taken out early by Cara Maria. Her standout season was Battle of the Sexes 2, where she was paired up with Leroy and they worked really well together, especially with winning 3 eliminations against Bananas and Nany, Averey and Johnny, and Teresa and Wes. All of them some pretty strong names, but it seemed like she didn't know how to handle the political element of the game, and she let it get to her, where she got herself DQ'd right before the end. Nia would not be on the show for several years and came back on All Stars 3, where she did win an elimination against Sylvia, a tough name, especially in the eliminations, and made it to her first final. But she performed really poorly in the dailies, and endurance was a huge thing, not in her favor. World Championship wasn't a good season for her at all, though it was mainly due to her being paired up with an Argentinian Rodrigo, causing them to be the second boot against Benja and Jody. Battle of the Eras was her return to the flagship show, and it's an alright showing. I mean, she still did pretty poorly in the dailies and had her fair share of allies, but managed to look bad in her elimination win against Amanda, and she lost mid-season to Michelle in the first individual women's round. Nia has some strengths, though, and they are not the strongest strengths, and she has some weaknesses that aren't the weakest, so she is roughly relatively in the middle of the list. But she did go out of her way to improve her social standing, and she has a decent enough elimination record. So I feel like she has more merits than some of the women right below her. At 8th place is Sylvia Elsrode, who competed on Invasion of the Champions, Vendettas, Final Reckoning, and All Stars 3. I find it very hard to talk about Sylvia as a player, not because she is actively bad or actively great, but she's kind of in the middle and has some redeemable qualities overall, but not enough to be a top tier player. Her first season was Invasion of the Champions, where she flipped on her Real World Skeletons alum at the first vote to put in Tony, which alienated her from them, but it did bring her into what would eventually become the Lavender Ladies. She won the final elimination before the Oasis to win her spot in the House against Latoya, though was thrown in once again at the very next vote where she had to take out Kailah. Sylvia found herself in a third consecutive elimination because the newer crop saw her as weaker, and she was taken out mid-season by Jenna. Vendettas yet again had her at the bottom, where her own group threw her into the second female elimination, so the men would not have to go in, where she did beat Melissa while being sick, but she was DQ'd soon after due to her illness. Final Reckoning was the season that showed her peak, where she had all of her Lavender Ladies alliance, was paired with Josh, who's a very strong competitor, and they actually got along. They won 2 eliminations in the season against Derek and Tori, and Bananas and Tony, won 2 late season dailies, and were the only couple who were in the game from the very beginning to the very end, as they did not arrive late, nor they were ever sent to the Redemption House or were eliminated, and they got second, though they might have been first, but that's a whole another story. All Stars 3 had her starting off great, as she won a few dailies and was a part of the Treehouse Alliance with Veronica, Kailah, Derek, and a few others that had some control, but she ended up being sent home mid-season against Nia, whom she underestimated. Sylvia has one really good season and has some mixed seasons, but she hasn't had an outright bad season yet, with a pretty good elimination record, so she's a bit above mediocre overall. So maybe I could have moved her down a spot, but I don't feel like it right now. At seventh is Kailah Casillas-Bird, who competed on Invasion of the Champions, Dirty 30, Vendettas, Final Reckoning, Total Madness, Ride or Dies, and All Stars 3. Kailah's a pretty interesting one to me, where many people claim that she is overrated, and due to her being so hated by the fanbase, some claim that she is underrated, where I think Kailah is relatively solid. Nothing more, nothing less. Her first season, Invasion of the Champions, had her pissing off everyone but Tony, Jenna, Nicole, and Corey off, to the point where she was thrown into the first elimination, beating Marie, and then was sent home in the first round after the Oasis period, losing to Sylvia. She did improve on Dirty 30, where she and Jenna aligned with Carmaria, Camilla, and Tori, and they had some good relationships with some of the men as well, winning a few dailies on the season, winning eliminations against Jenna and Anissa, while avoiding going to Redemption the entire season. But she lost to the Purge right before the final. Vendettas is arguably Kayla's best season, where she had an alliance with Cam and Marie, which kind of fell apart mid-season, and was in good with a lot of the men on the season, as she was part of winning a few dailies on the season, though I am sure all of them were in teams as well. Won an elimination against Marie, and was lucky that Cam was sabotaged, causing her to make it to the top four in the final, where she got last out of the four in the final. Things kind of peaked for her here, and the momentum, for the most part, was lost for her throughout the rest of her career. She entered the next season Final Reckoning with a bone to pick against the likes of Kaylee and Melissa, which led into an argument-turned altercation with Melissa, causing them to be DQ'd after a day. She would return a few seasons later on Total Madness, and it was clear that her head wasn't in the game at all, as she had her affair with Bear and had several meltdowns about her boyfriend, where she lost an elimination to KC mid-season and she didn't win a daily at all. All Stars 3 had her stock bumped up a bit, as she was in the Treehouse Alliance that had a lot of power in the season, and she found herself winning a few of the earlier dailies in the season, though you could argue that her being arguably the youngest one definitely benefited her here. After making it to her second and last final, as I'm recording this, she would take out Kelly Ann in the elimination and would get her highest placement as a runner up, i.e., second place. And then her final season, Ride or Dies, as I'm recording this, had her be a fresh boot with her new husband Sam, ending her career on a thud. I do think Kailah can hold her own and has many good seasons, but there's a few where she got in her own way, but she has a solid elimination, daily, and overall track record, though it isn't elite. At sixth place, I have Jonna Mannion, who competed on Rivals 1, Battle of the Seasons 2, Rivals 2, Free Agents, Battle of the Exes 2, All Stars 1, All Stars 2, All Stars 3, World Championships USA 2, and Battle of the Eras. I do think that she has a relatively up and down career, or one that is not the most consistent when you really look at everything. Her first season, Rivals 1, had her partner with Jasmine, and they won the first daily. And she, yes, I'm only just crediting her, won the elimination against Sarah and Caitlyn, though it really did nothing for them when it came to their position, as they are thrown into the final elimination for the women, where they are sent home against Cara Maria and Laurel. Battle of the Seasons 2 had her entire Cancun team be second in command with the San Diego team to essentially run the politics of that season. Though people would accuse her of sleeping with Zach to get success in the game, which is just misogynistic. They won a few dailies, and she got to the last elimination without seeing an elimination, with her and Derek getting booted by Ashley and Frank right before the final. Rivals 2 really wasn't a notable season for her like that, um, with her being paired with Nany, and it didn't seem like they were in with the veteran woman at the time, but they lost to Carmaria and Cook in the second to last women's elimination. Free Agents was a relatively forgettable elimination for her, but she did win an elimination against Emily, who isn't notable at all, and was a part of winning two dailies, but was beaten by Anissa mid-season. Battle of the Exes 2 was definitely a trying season, being paired up with Zach, who just wanted to make her life miserable, where they did win a daily, and they were close to making it to the end game. They technically did until the XL twist happened, but they were taken out by Jordan and Sarah in elimination, and then lost the final redemption to Bananas and Nany. She wouldn't return to the franchise for another 7 years, where she played an under-the-radar game on All-Stars 1, which got her to her first final ever. A few months later, she returned for All Stars 2, where she won a daily, just like the prior season, and avoided elimination all season as well, going to her second consecutive final, and won in a controversial manner with MJ. Her most impressive game easily was All Stars 3, where she was either a part of the Authority 4 or outright won a majority of or won several dailies in the season and had to win 2 eliminations against Beth and Rooney, where she won her second consecutive season. Obviously, her stock went way up due to the All Stars franchise, but things started balancing itself out afterwards, with her getting DQ'd mid season on World Championship, though she and Grant were in elimination anyways and probably could have went home that round anyways, where she made some sloppy political moves and winning a daily at the start with her partner. USA2 was just an abysmal showing, with secretly voting in Michelle and then getting dog walked by Tori in the second elimination. Battle of the Eras was kind of middling as well, where she was kind of on the outs of Era 3, tried to get out of being a target only to be a target that round anyways, and then was unceremoniously sent home by Rachel. For the amount of seasons that she has been on, only being on 3 finals or in 3 finals is very concerning, though she had a lot of close showings on her first one, which kind of balances things out. Jonna can definitely hold her own, but her most recent showings and a poor elimination record overall is definitely something that I just really cannot ignore like that. At fifth place is Jenna Compono, who competed on Battle of the Exes 2, Battle of the Bloodlines, Rivals 3, Invasion of the Champions, Dirty 30, Final Reckoning, War of the Worlds 1, and Total Madness. A part of me is shocked, and a part of me isn't shocked that Jenna is this high, despite her never winning, but I do find her to be a bit more consistent than some of the others that I ranked below her, though now that I'm thinking about it, I could easily be talked into switching her and Jonna, but as of right now, she's here. Jenna partnered with Jay on Battle of the Exes 2, where they were seen as layups, which was one of the reasons why they were never sent into elimination, but they did win a daily and essentially quit earlier on in the final. It wasn't until Battle of the Bloodline where she was taken seriously as a competitor, where she was partnered with her cousin Brianna. Due to being on the losing team throughout the team portion of the season, she had to go into several eliminations, where she won eliminations against Christina, Larissa, and Kellyanne throughout the season, though obviously only the latter is arguably the only impressive person in that group when it came to eliminations, where she and her cousin came third place in her second consecutive final. Rivals 3 was a pretty easy season for her, where being paired with Vince put her at the top of the house, and they're one of the better performers in the season, and also avoiding elimination in the season, where she made it to the third and last final, getting second place, which is her highest placement ever. Her following 2 seasons were still pretty good, though she was on the out socially on Invasion of the Champions due to working with pariahs Kailah and Tony, where she won 2 eliminations, taking out Anika and Sylvia, only the latter being impressive. Things did improve for her a bit after the pariahs left, and she was purged right before the final. Dirty 30 had her eliminated early, where she was used by Marie as a failed plan to boot Kailah, but she returned in the house right afterwards, winning the first redemption, aligning with Cara Maria, Camilla, and Tori, and avoiding eliminations for the rest of the season, where she was booted at the final purge once again. Unfortunately for Jenna, her momentum gained from her first several seasons was never met again, with many people blaming it on an injury she gained on Temps vs. Stars. She was partnered with Jemmye on Final Reckoning, where they ended up getting purged right away, mainly due to Jenna not really being able to follow instructions, and they weren't chosen to partake in the first redemption. On War of the Worlds 1, she was working with the main veterans at the time and used her one win with Gus to target Amanda, which wasn't the best move, only for them to go home mid-season right afterwards. And then in her final season, Total Madness had her checked out due to a drama with Zach, where she was thrown in early because the house claimed that she wanted to leave, and while she did beat Tori, she was sent in right away yet again and sent home mid-season by Anissa. She started on a very good trajectory with getting to 3 finals and 2 almost finals in the first 5 seasons, with a good elimination record, but then she just got weaker, but she has a decent enough career. Though it doesn't seem like she's going to come back, and even if she does come back, I doubt that she will win. At fourth, I have Nany Gonzalez, who played on Battle of the Seasons 2, Rivals 2, Free Agents, Battle of the Exes 2, Battle of the Bloodlines, Rivals 3, War of the Worlds 1, War of the Worlds 2, Total Menace, Double Agents, Spies, Lies, and Allies, and Ride or Dies. I'm hoping that this isn't going to take too long. One thing that stands out about Nany is that I don't ever recall her being early ever when it comes to being an early boot, my bad. And she's done over 10 seasons now. Even most of the all-time greats have some early season boots. She was on the Vegas team with Destin, Trishelle, and Alton, the latter two being from a season a decade earlier than hers and Destin's, where they were a part of that majority alliance, but things quickly fell apart. She was forced to go into elimination with Destin, where they took out Laura and Trey, and then she was taken out with Alton maybe throwing it right before the endgame to Marie and Rob. Her second season, Rivals 2, wasn't the most notable season, where she and Janae did not win a daily and seemed like they were on the outs with some of the women, causing them to be taken out against Cara Maria and Cook in the second to last women's elimination. Nany had arguably her best season on Free Agents, where she won a lot of dailies, which were under many different types of formats, and she stayed out of elimination the entire season, which says a lot with the kill card format, where she was close to beating Laurel on Free Agents, and was the closest that she was to winning a season as I'm recording this. She would do two more seasons before going on a hiatus, where despite a good start on Battle of the Exes 2, where she and Bananas won a daily and made the safe move, they were turned on by Wes and Teresa. Due to losing to Leroy and Nia, they had to win several redemption challenges to get back into the game late, or XL challenges, same difference, where they beat Simone and John, Adam and Britni, Averey and Johnny, and Janae and Zach. And after they returned, they were booted right before the final to Leroy and Teresa. And then she was paired with West on Rivals 3, where they were at the bottom of the veteran totem pole, and because they were kind of checked out, but had to go through a few eliminations near the end, winning against Jamie and Kelly Ann and Nate and Christina, but losing in the second last round to Dario and her cousin Nicole. We wouldn't see Nany for another few seasons/years, where she did return on War of the Worlds 1, where she was paired with Turbo and they performed well, winning a few dailies in the season, but she's the first woman booted when they went individual in that stupid elimination against Georgia. Joining the next season, War of the Worlds 2, Nany found herself on the outs with the US team and caused a lot of dissension in that team. But she was not targeted the entire season despite her antics, but she was thrown into the final elimination against Ashley, where she was taken out right before the final. Nany had her alliance with Jenna and Kailah throughout Total Madness, but she felt like they were liabilities, where she did win a few dailies in the season. And despite Casey's efforts, she was taken out by a pregnant Melissa, just missing the end game of that season. Nany would go on a streak of making it to the final in her next three seasons, which says a lot since in her first run she only made it to the final once. Getting her skull against Gabby later on in Double Agents, not winning any dailies in that season, and getting third with Leroy, as they worked closely with the Big Brother people that season. The Vacation Alliance was a thing by the time of Spies, Lies, and Allies, where she avoided elimination all season and won several dailies, though most, if not all of them, were during that team portion of the season, but was eliminated at the final against her girlfriend, Casey. It seemed like Ride or Dies was supposed to be the season that she won, where she was partnered with Bananas, and they won a few eliminations, winning against Mariah twice. The second one was with Mariah and Fessel, and then taking out Anissa at the final, and winning a few dailies, but she ended up getting second place. This actually might have been a closer to a win season for her than Free Agents, though it's debatable there. Nany's elimination record is all over the place and is currently leaning in the negative, but she can hold her own in eliminations and dailies, but she doesn't have that clutch skill, which is why she has not won yet in 12 seasons, despite almost always making it to the end game. Third is Ashley Mitchell, who competed on Rivals 3 Invasion of the Champion, Dirty 30, Final Reckoning, War of the Worlds 1, War of the Worlds 2, Total Madness, Double Agents, and Spies, Lies, and Allies. Honestly, I have a really hard time with her being this high on the list, and I shouldn't feel like that about someone who won two seasons, with one being an individual win and another one being a paired win. Ashley got into several arguments on Rivals 3, which did not help herself in Corey politically, but they were mainly booted mid-season against Christina and Nate due to Corey's pitfalls, not hers, so at least I'll give her that. Invasion of the Champions is a good showing for her, despite wanting to quit once or twice, where she became a part of the Lavender Ladies Alliance when the daily that got her to the Oasis and was able to get Amanda to give her the first elimination round of that triple elimination, where she ended up winning the season over Nicole and Camilla. She quit day one of 30-30 due to a luggage and a few other reasons, and then she came in midway throughout Final Reckoning, winning with Hunter against Faith and Angela to enter the game, where they kind of just added onto the numbers of the Lavender Ladies controlling the house of the season. They never went into elimination the entire season. After that, they did win a daily, but they were easily able to get to the final. The duo ended up winning, and she got more points than her partner, though many people mentioned the entire ordeal as very suspicious. But she stole Hunter's money, making her the biggest winner in the show's history when it comes to the money. But it also did some damage towards her reputation in future seasons. She joined the next season where she didn't have a lot of the numbers and people distrusted her, so she and Chase were sent into elimination against Hunter and Georgia, where she was booted first. Arguably her most impressive season is War of the Worlds 2, where she yet again didn't have the numbers, but she flipped to send in Ninja to protect herself, since it benefited her, but then decided to join Polly and Cam's alliance, where she was working with someone she hated a year ago, i.e. Carmaria, and she held her own in the dailies and even in the final, where she also beat Nany to get to the final, and it sucks that she was purged in the final, but it did show that she could adapt well, even without her friends. Without this season, she would have been much lower on this list. Her following two seasons were not good at all, with her being the second female boot on Total Madness, losing to Dee, and then being the first booted on Double Ages against Natalie, but due to all the DQs, she came back where she only lasted a round before losing to Cam early on in the season. Spice Lights and Allies was another good season for her, as she was aligned with the veterans and seemingly made a lot of good ground with the vets that were targeting her over the last few seasons, and even winning an elimination against Priscilla. It seemed like there's a good chance for her to make it to the final, at least the end game for sure, but she took it too far with an argument against Josh this season, causing her to be DQ'd. While she does have her strengths and won in harder, more competitive seasons, she's still too inconsistent for me to place higher, and her elimination record is not good at all. Honestly, it could be argued into putting her down lower, but putting her here is fine enough for now. Second is Nicole Zanatta, who competed on Invasion of the Champions, Vendettas, Double Agents, and All Stars 4. Some might think that I might be a bit crazy for having her this high, but Nicole's record is really good, and there really isn't anyone who has her record, especially out of the women. She was technically on the out Invasion of the Champions because no one wanted to deal with Kailah, Tony, or even slightly Jenna and Corey, but people really weren't mad at her like that, where she was able to blend in compared to her allies. She won the first daily to get into the Oasis and helped her team win another one, beating Amanda in the final elimination to make it to the final, but she ended up getting third in the final, which would be a repeat thing for her. Nicole would come back on Vendettas, where she only won a daily in the season and never went into an elimination at all during the season, as she wasn't targeted whatsoever, and it seemed like she had a lot of good relationships on the season. This caused her to make it to her second consecutive final, but an injury would cause her to be DQ'd, being in the bottom four of that final. Double Agents is the only season, as I'm recording this, that caused her to get eliminated, where she was injured during an early daily. I think it was the second daily. And then on All Stars 4, she was only in the bottom group twice, won two dailies, and used one of those wins to throw herself into elimination to get her star, which she did by booting Jasmine. And she just coasted to get to the final after that. But yet again, Nicole didn't do well in the final, getting fifth overall. Nicole has never been voted into eliminated, or targeted, as she's very good physically, but her performances in finals are poor, and she's really just not good mentally. But her never being eliminated after four seasons is a great record and shows consistency. And first place goes to Tori Deal, who competed on Dirty 30, Final Reckoning, War of the Worlds 2, Total Madness, Double Agents, Spies, Lies, and Allies, Ride or Dies, World Championship, USA 2, and Battle of the Eras. It's interesting that Tori debuted in the last season of the era, but she's easily the number one woman of her era looking at her resume, and I had no doubt that she was going to be number one before I started this. She was a rookie on Dirty 30 without getting the rookie treatment, where she only went into elimination once, where she took out Marie, won a few dailies in the season, and was aligned with a stronger woman in Camilla, Carmaria, Kailah, and Jonna, which got her to be a rookie finalist, getting third overall. Her second season Final Reckoning was disappointing to say the least, as she had no team chemistry with her ex, Derek, and they performed poorly in the dailies, choked in the elimination against Joss and Sylvia, and were sent home in the second redemption. War of the Worlds 2 had her on the out of the US team, but she is still seen as one of the stronger women. But politics was more important, causing her to be sent into elimination at the two-thirds portion of the season, where she did beat Georgia and Jenny before turncoating to the UK team, where she was perched in the middle of the final, where without that she would have won here. The next few seasons are easily the worst of her career, as she failed to pressure D to send her into the first women's elimination to get her skull, but she did go into the third female elimination to beat the checked out Jenna, but things didn't go that way as Jenna ended up beating her. Tori's bad streak continued on Double Agents, where she was talking too much about wanting to beat the weaker woman, which caused her to be thrown in against Anissa in the second women's elimination. There were a few women who DQ'd before her, but this was the official second women's elimination, where she did lose to Anissa. Luckily for Tori, the Vacation Alliance became a thing by Spies, Lies, and Allies, where the veterans worked together and it caused her to get an easy path to go to the end, where she only went into elimination once at the very end to take out Amanda, and she was dominating for a lot of the final, but got second. The positive momentum only continued for her from here on out on to Ride or Dice, where she still had the Vacation Alliance and the veterans loyal to her, as more of them appeared after she and Devin took out Kailah and Sam in the first round, where they never went into elimination again, and she also won a few dailies in the team portion. She and Devin made it to the final, where they dominated that final the entire time, giving both of them their first wins. She was on World Championship paired with Nany, where they didn't win a single daily during the season, so they're kind of disappointing competitively. But they also were never sent into elimination either, getting second place, but it was mainly due to their relationships with other teams. Trey went on to her second consecutive spin-off on USA 2, where she was yet again one of the strongest women, as she won several dailies, some of those even being during the individual portions, made deals and alliances with some of the CBS women so they could all make it to the end, though she got last in the final, which wasn't the best look. To no one's surprise, she was very well protected on the Battle of the Eras, but the Vacation Alliance faced some trouble in the middle portion of the season, where she barely won her elimination against Casey. But she was able to make new alliances in the second half of the season and won most of the dailies out of the women. But her poor performance in the last daily caused her to go into elimination with Carmaria, and doing that elimination right before the final caused her to get fourth, which is last out of the women. Tori is very well-rounded, knows how to make alliances, blend in socially, has a strong elimination record, and makes it to the finals most of the time, but only having one win shows that she isn't the greatest at finals. But her resume is better than everyone else in Era 3 of the women, so here she is at first. And there's really no other choice. So, like the list for the Era 3 men, the list for the Era 3 women is pretty self-explanatory and relatively simple. Obviously, this is due to the modern version of the challenge and the formats that's commonly associated with the challenge mainly being formulated and stable at this point in time, so you can easily categorize what makes someone good and what makes someone bad without all that janky stuff that is in some of those earlier eras. This video isn't nearly as long as the Era 2 woman and the Era 1 woman due to the straightforwardness, though I do think that there's a bit... No, it's either an equal amount or a bit less of the Era 3 woman compared to the Era 2 woman and the Era 4 woman. Not the Era 4 woman, I mean the Era 1 woman. Yes, there's definitely a lot more Era 1 women that I had to analyze. I am pretty sure that there's going to be less era for women when I eventually make that list because one, they didn't have nearly as much time, and two, they don't have nearly as much data. But yeah, the results for the era 3 women were pretty obvious. There are some that I might change just depending on the mood, but overall, I feel pretty fine with this list overall. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon. Bye!